I wear a few different hats on this here internet machine. Movie critic, pop culture commentator, video gaming personality, and until recently, one of those hats was also that one guy who still gives a shit about what's happening on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yes, where the rest of geek culture had largely called it quits once it became clear the series was going to try to be its own thing as opposed to a weekly volley of fucking Easter eggs setting up the adjunct Marvel movies, I stuck around. Mainly because I liked the cast, largely because Season 2 was genuinely good network TV fare, and finally because I'd committed myself to doing recaps for my blog and I didn't want to let the readership down. Yeah, and I've also always had kind of a thing for ming-na, alright? Fucking sue me. Anyway, point is, I tried, folks. I really tried. But Season 3 was such a goddamn letdown, so unfocused, so boring, so much a betrayal of all the promise and goodwill Season 2 had built up, that eventually I couldn't bring myself to say anything about it beyond furiously mashing the fucking keyboard and asking how the hell my life had come to this. Make no mistake, it's not as though Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had magically morphed into Game of Thrones or something at some point, only to tumble back down to mediocrity, but for a series that mainly only ever aspired to be a modern version of campy 90s syndicated sci-fi shows, the back half of Season 1 into Season 2 was about as good a version of that as you're ever gonna get, and with an interesting mystery, authentic twists, and a ridiculously entertaining series MVP turn by Kyle MacLachlan. The gradual unveiling of what had actually happened to Coulson and the bigger twist it was distracting from, well played. Managing to hide a full-fledged Marvel superheroine in plain sight as part of the main cast, all the way into the middle of Season 2, gangbusters. Pretty much everything to do with Mr. Hyde, Jia-Ying, Raina, Whitehall, pretty much the entire Inhuman story, except for Lincoln, who always sucked from the get-go, all that and Elizabeth Henstridge, nothing wrong with that. Meanwhile, for all the largely accurate hand-wringing about the Marvel Cinematic Universe seriously lacking in diversity, shut the fuck up, yes it is. Prior to Civil War, the Avengers were whiter than a Martha's Vineyard Panera bread. S.H.I.E.L.D. was the Marvel show with plenty of women characters, Asian main characters, black main characters, a Latina superhero, a gay superhero, good stuff, positive. And then, at least on the all-important storytelling front, Season 3 managed to fuck it all up, with interesting story elements like the true nature of Hydra, the portal to another planet, the Secret Warriors, that one great twist with Lash, and the obvious opportunity to tie the Inhuman storyline to Civil War, all short-shrifted in favor of multiple drawn-out will-they-won't-they romances, capped off by a reprise of the Sky and Ward shit, aka the least interesting aspect of Season 1, which is saying something. Ugh. We're still gonna get a Season 4 apparently, so maybe there's a chance that it will get better again, but at this point it mostly feels like the show is gonna run out the clock until it's reached syndication length and Marvel has something for Freeform to run in the afternoon, like USA does with Law & Order. What the fuck happened? Well, some of it seems to be the result of internal politics at Marvel. See, Marvel, the company, even though owned by Disney, is still technically run by this guy, CEO Isaac Perlmutter. He's actually 73 years old, but this is pretty much the only photograph anybody has of him. He's a reclusive, super successful billionaire, and by all accounts, really, really difficult to work with. And while he's credited as one of the forces that pulled Marvel out of bankruptcy, he's also the name that tends to come up as a key reason why Marvel sucks at merchandising female characters, or why it took fucking forever for the studio to greenlight movies with women and non-white people as leads, among other things. So yeah, this is the guy. He's also allegedly the main force behind the push to make the Fantastic Four not really exist anymore in the comics because he doesn't want to promote characters whose movie rights Marvel doesn't own themselves, which supposedly is also the reason the role of the X-Men and other mutants got diminished in recent years in the comics in favor of the Inhumans, which is probably why that franchise was pegged for a movie and why Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spent basically 2 seasons setting up who they were. But sometime about a year and a half ago, the people making the Marvel movies supposedly complained so much about how awful it was to work with this guy that Disney stepped in and restructured the whole fucking thing, so Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios reports directly to them instead. But Perlmutter still has top-level control over the comics and TV side of things, which might be why several actors who said they were done with the franchise suddenly decided they weren't, which is a good thing, but also why that Inhumans movie got pushed off to We'll Get Around to It land, and why there's less crossover between the shows and movies than there otherwise might have been, which is unfortunate. Yeah, and I'm sure some of that alleged tension certainly contributed, but folks, honestly, I think the answer is a lot more fucking simple when it comes to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Even though the series got massively better in Season 2, the ratings didn't. So the show pretty much went all out trying to make itself better and turn into a substantially different type of experience, and it didn't really draw more people into watching what was already a consistently shrinking audience. And since that make a better show fan base didn't cut it, they had to go looking elsewhere, and it's pretty clear to me that they concluded that the segment of their viewership worth shoring up was the shippers. For those who don't know, shipping is a subset of fandom that's primarily interested not in the story, the conflict, or the mythology, but in the character relationship. But not in the here's what makes it interesting dynamic sense, in the which actors and or characters make a cute couple sense. And since Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is pretty much all characters who are all desperately in need of a hug in one way or another, shipping pretty much feels like its core regular viewer base now that it's not appointment viewing for Marvel completists anymore. And appropriately, Season 3 is basically wall-to-wall shipping service, with every storyline that might have been interesting resulting otherwise kneecapped by a decision to turn it into an excuse for 2 or more actors to make goo-goo eyes at each other across multiple episodes. Now look, I got no issue with a love story, far from it. Like any storyline, if it fits well and is well executed, bring it on. Case in point, they spent like 3 seasons getting Fitz and Simmons to finally go for it definitively, and that was worth the wait. Those two are adorable. But when every storyline gets reworked so it can be presented in the context of a romance, that's not just shit pandering, it's boring and predictable. And when you look at season 3, that's exactly what they did. Every plot point was made to center on a fucking ship. S.H.I.E.L.D. versus the ATCU? Well, that becomes Coulson and Linda. Who is Lash? Lash is Andrew, so now that's a May and Andrew story. Uneasy alliance between S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Secret Warriors? That becomes Mac and Yo-Yo's story. Simmons goes to another fucking planet. What does she find? The third piece to a love triangle. Of course, what the fuck else? Daisy learning to be a leader of her fellow Inhumans? Somehow that's an excuse to try and make us care about her falling for Pikachu here. Hive invades and tries to conquer Earth? Somehow that all boils down to dredging up the Skyward thing again. Joy. Can the show come back from this? Who can say, honestly? Along with burning up a lot of Season 2's goodwill, Season 3 also squandered potentially huge storylines in the Hive and Secret Warriors business that could have grown into really interesting angles for several seasons. Short of some significant change of course, like a renewed, stronger connection to the movies, which is not going to happen, or another well-plotted season-length storyline, sure, maybe. I'm not sure where else there is to go but run out the clock with a return to Season 1's Monster of the Week business. Will I still watch it? Yeah, probably, but I'm not going to hold my fucking breath for a big surprise at this point. That ship seems to have sailed.